Neighbors sued me after harassing my dog for months. Several months ago, I found myself in a frustrating and rather infuriating situation involving my neighbor and his new hobby. To be fair, I'm not generally the kind of person who gets upset over others enjoying their interests. If someone wants to fly a drone or engage in some other hobby, I don't mind as long as they're respectful about it. But my neighbor, he took things to a whole new level. It all started when he bought a drone. He was really into it, but for some reason, he decided that his new toy should be used in the most inconsiderate way possible. I quickly realized that his idea of flying a drone didn't involve just hovering in his own yard or parks like most people do. No, his version was much more intrusive. In the first few weeks after getting the drone, it became clear that he had no regard for anyone else's privacy or space. He would hover his drone right outside people's windows, fly it in front of cars. But the worst part of all of this, he constantly flew the drone in my backyard right over my dog. My dog is a 70-pound Malamute. He's a big, tough guy with a fluffy coat and a calm demeanor, but like most dogs, he's sensitive to loud noises, and the high-pitched whir of the drone was terrifying to him. It wasn't just a nuisance, it was traumatic. The drone would buzz above his head, dive low over him, and circle back to do it again. Each time my dog would jump, bark, and scramble to get away from it. The stress and anxiety this caused him was hard to watch, and I was becoming genuinely worried about what might happen if the drone accidentally hit him. Not to mention, there was the possibility that if he reacted out of fear, he could get injured or worse. At first I tried to handle it calmly. I approached my neighbor several times and asked him politely to stop flying his drone over my property. I explained the situation with my dog, telling him that it was causing serious distress and that I was concerned for his safety. His response was dismissive, to say the least. He laughed at me, told me to get over it, and shrugged it off. He didn't care at all. It was clear that he was one of those people who didn't think the rules of common decency applied to him. When my polite requests went unanswered, I decided to take a more formal approach and called the police. Unfortunately, the officers didn't have much of an option. They basically told me there wasn't much they could do other than ask him nicely to stop flying over my property. Of course, that did nothing to deter him. A few days later, he was back at it, flying the drone in my yard again, hovering above my poor dog and putting him on edge. By late December, I had reached my breaking point. My dog was clearly distressed every time he heard the drone approaching, and I could see the fear in his eyes. One afternoon, as the drone swooped in yet again to dive towards him, my dog did something I never expected. With incredible speed and agility for his size, he jumped up and snatched the drone right out of the air with his teeth. The drone didn't stand a chance. It was torn to pieces, a tangled mess of wires and broken plastic. At first I was relieved. My dog had finally had enough of the harassment and took matters into his own paws, so to speak. But things quickly took a turn for the worse. My neighbor stormed over to my house furious and shouting profanities at me. He accused me of intentionally training my dog to attack his drone, which was absurd. I wasn't about to engage with him, though. I just let him vent and told him that it wasn't my fault his drone had been flying too low and too recklessly. A week later, I received a summons to small claims court. My neighbor was suing me for $900, the supposed cost of the destroyed drone, and an additional $300 for denying him access to his property because the drone had sat in my yard for a couple of hours before he was able to retrieve it. To say I was furious would be an understatement. I couldn't believe he had the audacity to sue me after everything he'd put me and my dog through. But here's the thing, this wasn't just about the drone. To me, it was about standing up for my dog, who had been scared, harassed, and put in danger by this idiot. My dog is my best friend. We've been through a lot together. He's been with me through thick and thin, through moves, through college, through my first job, my first car, and even my first home. He was my constant companion, and no one was going to harm him without facing consequences. So I did what any reasonable person would do in this situation. I reached out for legal advice. I turned to the online legal advice community, where I got some amazing support and guidance. I learned that my neighbor's lawsuit was as flimsy as it seemed. Not only was it incredibly hard to prove that my dog had been trained to attack the drone, but I had plenty of evidence on my side that showed he had been harassing my dog for months. When we finally made it to court, the judge had little patience for my neighbor's claims. He laughed at the idea that I had trained my dog, but that wasn't all I had in my corner. I'd been documenting everything for months. I had dozens of photos of my backyard showing how low the drone had flown. I also had videos of the drone harassing my dog, flying too close and circling around him time and time again. On top of that, I had all the medical records from when I had to take my dog to the vet to address the physical and emotional toll this had taken on him. I had receipts for the $700 X-ray, the $250 sedation fee, the $400 dental exam, and even the extra medications and food I had to buy to help him recover from the anxiety caused by the constant harassment. The damages to my dog were not small. I was looking at thousands of dollars in vet bills, and I wasn't about to let this guy get away with it. The judge, after hearing everything and reviewing the evidence, ruled in my favor. In the end, my neighbor not only lost the case, but he ended up owing me nearly $2,000. As if that wasn't satisfying enough, the outcome didn't stop there. My neighbor's reckless flying of the drone got the attention of the Federal Aviation Administration (FAA). Turns out he had violated multiple regulations. He was flying the drone too close to an airport, too near other people, and too high without keeping it within his sight. On top of that, his drone wasn't even registered. I'm not sure what kind of punishment he'll end up facing from the FAA, but it's safe to say he's going to be dealing with some serious consequences for his irresponsible behavior. Looking back, I'm just thankful that my dog is okay. It was a long, stressful ordeal, but I'm glad I stood up for him. That dog has been through so much with me, and I owe him the protection he deserves. The lesson here is simple. Never underestimate the lengths someone will go to for the ones they love, especially when it comes to protecting those who can't speak for themselves. My neighbor may have thought his drone was more important than my dog, but in the end, he learned the hard way just how much my dog means to me. Update: it's been over a year since the court case with my neighbor, and to say life has been a whirlwind since then would be an understatement. Things have settled down somewhat, but I've learned a lot, both about people and about how to handle situations where your values and your loved ones are under threat. Let me catch you up on what's been happening. After the judge ruled in my favor and my neighbor was ordered to pay me nearly $2,000 for my dog's treatment, I thought that would be the end of the drama. I assumed my neighbor would get the hint, disappear back into his own world, and leave us in peace. Unfortunately, I was wrong. It's hard to say exactly what happened in his mind, but my neighbor didn't take the loss well. He didn't just walk away quietly as I expected. For a while it seemed like he was trying to make my life miserable in whatever way he could. It started subtly, with small acts of petty annoyance. He would park his car directly in front of my house, blocking my driveway for hours. At first I tried to ignore it. After all, it could have been an accident. But it wasn't. I started documenting these incidents, taking pictures of his car blocking my driveway, and even filming some of the moments when he would glare at me from his front porch when I'd come home from work. The guy was clearly upset, but I wasn't about to let his childish behavior get to me. One night, I got home late from a work meeting and saw something strange. My backyard light was on, and I could just barely make out a figure standing near the fence, looking into my yard. My heart sank. I knew it wasn't just an innocent passerby. It was my neighbor again. I don't know what he was doing, but I decided it was time to stop ignoring his antics. The next day, I called the police again. I was ready to take things to the next level if needed. I told them about his continued harassment and the incident where he had been hanging around my yard late at night. They took me seriously this time, and they came by to have a chat with him. They warned him that any further violations of my privacy or any more aggressive behavior would not be tolerated. I was finally taking a stand. It wasn't just about the drone anymore, it was about respect and boundaries. To my surprise, after the police visit, things calmed down for a while. My neighbor seemed to get the message that I wasn't going to tolerate his immature revenge tactics. But that's not where the story ends. It wasn't long before my neighbor's actions caught up with him in another way thanks to the FAA. After the court case, I wasn't sure what would happen with his drone violations, but I knew that the FAA was involved. They had looked into the numerous rules he had broken, and word on the street was that they were planning to make an example of him. I didn't think much of it after the court case. But a few months later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that my neighbor had been facing some serious consequences. The FAA had launched a full investigation into his drone flying, and it turned out he had violated some major regulations. Not only was his drone unregistered, but he had also been flying it in restricted airspace near an airport, no less and way above the legal altitude. Apparently, the FAA doesn't take too kindly to people who put the safety of others in jeopardy, especially when they're also breaking the law. Then came the fines. Big ones. He was hit with a hefty penalty for every violation he had committed, and his drone was permanently grounded. To make matters worse, the investigation revealed that he had been flying drones commercially without the proper certifications. As a result, his hobby turned into a full-blown legal nightmare. I have to admit, part of me felt a little vindicated knowing that he was facing such consequences. But another part of me felt bad for him. He had done this to himself. He had put his obsession with his drone above everyone else's well-being, including his own. On the positive side, my dog was recovering well after everything he had been through. It had taken time, but I was determined to get him the help he needed. After the anxiety caused by my neighbor's drone harassment, he was more nervous around loud noises and fast-moving objects, but we worked through it. The vet had recommended some calming therapy, and I took him for long walks to help him regain his confidence. He had been through so much, and I wanted him to feel safe again. I also started taking him to dog obedience classes. Not because he needed it, he was a good dog, always loyal and well behaved, but I thought it would help both of us. The classes gave us a chance to bond and helped him work through some of his anxieties. I noticed him becoming more relaxed, especially when we spent time together outside. It's funny how much you learn about yourself when you're forced to fight for something you love. I realized that through this whole ordeal, I had learned to set boundaries and stand up for what I cared about. In the past, I might have let someone like my neighbor push me around. But after everything that happened with my dog, I had become stronger. I would never let anyone or anything threaten the happiness and safety of the ones I love. Since the Faw's actions and his growing legal troubles, I haven't heard much from my neighbor. The odd thing is he hasn't even tried to apologize or make amends. It's as though he's completely disappeared into the background of our neighborhood. I've seen him a few times, but it's always from a distance. He never approaches me, and I never go near him. There's no reason to. I suppose some people are just too proud to admit when they've been wrong. Maybe he's embarrassed, or maybe he's just waiting for it all to blow over. Either way, I don't care. The important thing is that my dog and I are finally at peace. We've both been through a lot, but we came out stronger on the other side. As for my dog, he's still my best friend. He's been by my side through everything: my graduation, moving to a new home, navigating the ups and downs of life. I've always believed that pets are family, and this experience reinforced that belief more than ever. My dog is my constant companion, and I'll never let anything or anyone threaten his well-being again. These days, life is much quieter. The neighbor's drone has long since been grounded, and we're living in peace. I'm more cautious now, especially when it comes to people who seem to lack respect for others. I've learned to trust my instincts, and I'm more willing to fight for the things I love. In the end, I wouldn't trade my dog for anything. No matter what my neighbor thought or what kind of trouble he brought upon himself. And as for the neighbor, well, he got his lesson the hard way, and I think it's safe to say he won't be flying drones anywhere near my property again.